Hello and welcome to Beyond Markets, where we bring you up to speed on development outcomes in Africa. I'm Kenneth Igbomor. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today. Coming up on Beyond Markets today, we'll discuss how the COVID-19 pandemic is impacting the marine and shipping industries. You can join the conversation on social media. Let us know what you think. The hashtag to use is Beyond Markets. You can also hit me up at Kenneth Igbomor. Now, Allianz Global Corporate Specialty says the shipping industry has largely proved resilient to the coronavirus outbreak, as the industry is responsible for transporting as much as 90% of global trade. However, shipping incidents in 2019 were up 5%, while 90% of kidnappings reported at sea in 2019 were in the Gulf of Guinea off the coast of West Africa. Now, Captain Rahul Khanna, the AGCS Global Head of Marine Risk, joins me now to discuss how the shipping industry is bracing up to the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today, Captain Rahul. And let's get your note first on how the COVID-19 pandemic is playing out in the global shipping industry.
Hi, good afternoon to you. Thanks for calling me in. Yeah, I think as you've summarized quite nicely, that over the last years, the shipping industry's loss records have improved quite dramatically. I think we've improved over the last decade by as much as 70%. Total losses have declined, and well, which is a great thing. And this is something which we can attribute to a lot of good regulation, industry doing a lot of good work. But at this point of time, where COVID-19 has disrupted pretty much every industry in the world, shipping industry is no exception. And what we are seeing is one of the biggest problems that shipping industry is going to face in the medium to long term is the economic downturn, which will happen. We see that most of the commentators are saying this is going to be probably the biggest recession after Second World War the world is going to face. And shipping is very much correlated to the world trade as it goes on. And some of the numbers that are coming out are really a bit scary, in the sense that IMF has said that the global GDP is going to be -3% for this year, which would mean that the trade will taper off, and that would mean a serious economic downturn for shipping as well. Now, what happens when this happens with shipping industry? I think the biggest problem is going to be that when we see a downturn in the industry, the first steps the ship owners and the associated companies would want to do is to cut cost and budgets. And from previous downturns, we are aware that the first targets of such budget cuts are maintenance and then also crew, which has a very serious and severe impact on the safety of the shipping industry in general. So all the hard work that we've done over the last decade or so in bringing the total losses down can actually be undone if we are not careful, and if we are not making sure that we are still resilient and the safety standards are not let off due to this downturn, which we will see in the medium to long term. There are other issues which are impacting the shipping industry from a COVID perspective, which are more short term, and one of the biggest ones is the situation with the crews on board the vessels. So seafarers on most of the vessels, about 100,000 of them, are stuck on board the ships, and they are unable to get back home and repatriate home after their normal tenure on vessels, which could be anything between 3 to 6 to 8 months. And this is causing a serious problem in the industry. Now, there's a lot of lobbying going on to provide the essential worker status to seafarers so that they can be repatriated to their homes after they completed the tenure. And why is this important? As we have previously said in our reports, that as much as 75% of accidents are attributed to human error. And human error, when being such a major cause of accidents in the shipping industry and in other industries, so it's fair to say. And if the crew members are not able to go back home, their state of mind is not at its best, to say the least. A lot of seafarers we've spoken to and who have come up said that they don't feel the best mental health at the time when they're serving on board after a prolonged period of working on board ships. And some of them have been on board stuck for almost a year. And couple this with the problem that they are worried about their family, they're worried about people at home being well or not well, and then the hazardous environment that these seafarers operate on the ships. All this sort of brings a perfect storm in the making. So we need to make sure that this fatigue doesn't set into seafarers, and they need to be sent home when their period on board the vessels is finishing, and that safety expect the safety of the vessel is not jeopardized. I can go on to the list of
All right,
COVID impacts.
Rahul, talking about creating a perfect storm, let's just backtrack a little into what happened towards the tail early part of this year, and where we saw geopolitical tensions playing a key role in the shipping industry. And I'd like you to speak on that point.
Yes, that is another problem that we have been facing for such a long time. Shipping in general is a passive industry from the point of view that seafarers are workers on board who are generally not allowed to carry up firearms and defend themselves, and they become an easy target for a lot of these organizations who could target shipping as a sort of sitting duck, if I may say so. But the other big problem that we are facing is that geopolitical tensions, especially the trade wars that we've seen between China and the US recently, and some of the regional conflicts that have resulted in attacks and kidnappings of seafarers, that is also causing, adding upon the already problematic situation that we have at hand. Seafarers, again, as I said, are, because they're seen as defenseless in some sense, it's easy to board these vessels if you have faster boats, and a lot of these terrorist organizations have also started to attack, especially some of the ones in South China Sea as well. So these in Philippines as well. So we are looking at a problem which is exasperating itself, which is compounding itself. Firstly, we have a problem of COVID, where crews are not able to get home. Then we have the trade wars, and then we have these terrorist organizations looking at seafarers as a easy target, and then of course the piracy, which is again rearing its heads again. We had a lot of work done over the years to control the Somali piracy, where vessels were kidnapped, including the crew, and hijacked. And that, after many years of sustained effort by coastal states, by international workforce, which put in navies around in the region in Somalia, we brought the situation under control. And I think last year there were no attacks in Somalia, which is a great effort. But then the local piracy, the regional piracy in the Gulf of Guinea, is now again a top hotspot for kidnappings. The piracy is an age-old, if you call it a business model, because and this depends and stems from the state of the state. If the state is a bit lawless, there is not much of a government control over its coastal borders and seas around the country, then piracy will manifest itself. And to counter this, we have to make sure that we provide support to the governments to control this. As we saw in Somali piracy years, it ran on for 5-7 years, I can't remember exactly, but the problem was that the vessels were kidnapped, hijacked, taken to the Somali coastlines, and they were there without any intervention from the state. And it took a lot of effort from an international navies to come together and act on it to get that sorted. And we don't want something like this to happen again. The problem with Gulf of Guinea is that the attacks on crews are violent, and in kidnappings, and there have been some unfortunate fatalities as well, which is something that we are really worried about.
All right, but I'd like you to speak to the importance of not losing the progress we're making on trade, especially with these security attacks coming in, especially in the Gulf of Guinea, and what can you think can be done to mitigate the impact on vessels applying that region?
So I think the shipping industry itself has learned quite a lot from the years of Somali piracy, where vessel hijacking was so rampant. So we have procedures in place, the best management practices which were issued and have been revised over the period of years. Number 5, the version 5 is now out. And these are the practices that ship owners and ships themselves should follow and follow the best practices, which include a lot of different measures, including providing armed guards on board the vessels to deter such attacks. But this was a model where the problem was concentrated in the Gulf of Aden region, Somalia. And in general, the attacks were not violent. The vessels were hijacked, and the models were different. But now with Gulf of Guinea, I think we need slightly different sort of a solution. The same solution may not fit. because we could put armed guards on board the vessels during the transit, but here vessels are sitting at anchorage in Gulf of Guinea, in places like Benin and Togo and other places, and having armed guards for undefined long period of time is neither economically viable nor practically possible. So we might have to find a different solution. I think, as I said earlier, the best solution comes from the coastal states policing its water a lot more, making sure they track the waters around their coast. The boats are identified. Use a little bit of technology to track all the marine traffic which is out there. Positively identify the vessels that are coming in and are going out, and in that process try to find out if there are unidentified vessels which are small boats which are being used by pirates to board these ships and merchant ships, and that's where the controls can be put in place by the coastal states. I think that's what something will help.
All right, Captain Rahul, looking through your recent shipping review, and quite an interesting work put together. And I'd like to say you note that despite the resilience of the shipping industry, that the economic downturn and the operating conditions present unique challenges. And you also note that ship owners will face additional cost pressures from the downturn in trade. And I'd like you to clarify on these issues.
Yeah, so I think, as I said a little while ago, that the economic downturn, because shipping is directly correlated to the world trade, the world trade is expected to come down sharply. It has already come down quite a bit. I think the report says that the German Association of Ship Owners have already said that in March and April, the trade was down by 30 to 40%, and hence the revenues are going to get impacted for ship owners. What we need to make sure is that the budget cuts which will follow are done in such a manner that we do not compromise on safety. Now, shipping industry works on a wide spectrum of quality of operations. So some ship owners would operate on one side where you have the best of the standards, the best of the practices, you use the latest technologies, and they are on top of everything, so to say. But they have the other end of the spectrum where we have smaller ship owners generally, or some of the owners who are not as savvy with safety, and they are cutting corners sometimes. So we will deal with the industry throughout the spectrum. And so what we need to make sure that the impact that we have from COVID-19 by the economic downturn, and also because of the crews, and also all the other issues that COVID-19 brings in, that we try and make sure that the standards don't slip in towards the lower end of the spectrum, which is where the losses are going to come from. So we have this issue where a lot of these smaller owners would firstly cut the maintenance budget, which eventually leads to machinery damage claims, which can eventually lead to a larger accident. And then, of course, as we all know, we need well-trained and quality, talented crew on board some of these vessels, and some of these ships are very specialized. And these crews need to be on board, and they need to be paid well. They need to be taken care of. Their mental health and well-being needs to be ensured by the ship owners. And all these factors would severely impact if we don't keep a tight control on these.
All right then, Captain Rahul, I need you to hold that thought for a second. We'll take a quick break. Then when we return, definitely we'll continue on your thoughts around the crew welfare in a time like this. I've been speaking to Captain Rahul Khanna. He's the Global Head for Marine Risk at Allianz Global Corporate Specialty. We'll continue Beyond Markets after the break. Welcome back to Beyond Markets. If you're just joining us, my guest has been Captain Rahul Khanna. He's the Global Head of Marine Risk at Allianz Global Corporate Specialties. And we've been talking about marine and shipping industry and how the COVID-19 pandemic is playing out in that space. Earlier on, Rahul was talking about the challenges around the welfare for the crew members. And I'd like you to continue on that point and how we can overcome some of the new challenges caused by the pandemic.
Yes, I think, as I said, 75% of shipping incidents and accidents are a result of human error, and that has to so that makes it that very important that we take care of crew well-being and crew repatriation in such difficult times. I think ship owners can do plenty of things. Firstly, they can have some sort of a regional cruise, if possible, to provide on these vessels, which are easier to repatriate. And I said earlier that there's a lot of lobbying being done by various organizations connected into shipping with the governments to try and provide the essential workers status to ship seafarers. Now, I think over the years, we have to remember that during this pandemic, shipping industry has played a very important role. That the trade has kept growing, the essential supplies, the food and water, the medicines, the PPEs that we need today have been provided by the ships, because 90% of the world trade is done on ships. So they've done their part. Now it's up to the governments to provide an infrastructure where seafarers can be repatriated efficiently and quickly as and when they need it. So providing an essential worker status will allow them to pass through borders, will allow them to get home in time and be with their families, where all of us are enjoying that benefit. But unfortunately, seafarers are stuck on board, as I said earlier, for months on now, over and above their normal periods of duty. So it is so essential that we get this thing right and ensure that this does not have a spill-on effect on vessel safeties and spoil all the hard work that we have done over the years.
All right, Captain Rahul, still on the human error, though, I'd like you to speak to how it impacts the marine insurance claims, and what segments of marine insurance do you think are going to be the hardest hit?
I think human error is, unfortunately, is such a wide topic that it is very hard to pin down on a particular aspect. Now, we are facing a lot of issues already in the industry. We have highlighted one of the key issues that is very topical these days is the container ship fires. Now, I would like to touch upon this because I think this is one of the biggest concerns that we have in the industry, and some of the claims that we have seen in the recent past have been one of the biggest claims that the industry has seen, reinsurance industry has seen in the last decade or so. And the result is that we need to ensure that the container ships, although they have grown in size over the last 30, 40 years by as much as 1,500%. Back in 1968, when the first container ships came around, they used to carry roughly around 1,500 TEUs, as we call them, total equivalent units of containers. And now in 2020, we are looking at ships carrying 24,000 containers. This is almost a 1,500% rise in the size of ships. What has happened consequently is that while the vessels have grown because of economies of scale, the fire safety and fire protection and detection measures haven't kept up to speed. Earlier last year, I was participating in a working group which has proposed some measures to the International Maritime Organization to take on to make sure that the fire safety and fire protection is kept with pace with the rising size of the vessels. And some of these vessels are so big that it is so difficult for the crew to actually firstly find the source of the fire and then arrive at those places and try and fight the fires. So the number of crews on these vessels, in fact, has decreased as the vessel size has increased. And in the last year, I think we've had some of the instances where some crew members have lost their life trying to fight these fires as well. And the claims that we have seen, the cost of these claims have been in hundreds of millions, not just tens of millions. So these are big events which need some intervention from the regulatory body in shipping and also from the other stakeholders in the shipping industry, namely marine insurers, ship owners, classification societies, coastal states, and of course, International Maritime Organization. Apart from this big issue of container ship fires, we are also seeing a lot of a rise in the ro-ro ships, which are basically car carriers and similar vessels. There have been a sharp increase in accidents on such vessels as well. In the last year itself, we see two major incidents on these types of ships, where stability is a key issue. And of course, firefighting is also one of the causes because of the accidents have happened on these vessels. For our perspective, crew play a very important role in the first line of defense on board any such incident, especially in questions of where there's a question of stability. It's the crew who are on board who need to ensure that they know what the vessel stability is at the time of sailing. And if there is any doubt, they need to put their foot down. Most of these ro-ro vessels run on a very tight schedules. There's a lot of commercial pressure on them by the ship owners or charterers or shippers to sail the vessels as quickly as possible. And we have seen from previous accidents that many times the securing the cargo is incomplete. The calculations for stability of the vessels haven't been done, or if they have been done, they are done on information which is not accurate. And in these cases, I think it's vitally important that all the stakeholders, including the cargo owners, the ship owners, the ports, the authorities, they all work together to make sure that we provide a safer environment for these vessels to operate on.
Definitely, collaboration is key. But I would like you to speak on the insurance implications for the supply chains coming under strain.
Yes. So one of the other impacts of COVID has been the disruption in these supply chains. The logistics and supply chain industry has been hit quite hard because the borders were closed. A lot of cargo was abandoned in itself because they couldn't move any further. In the early days of the pandemic, back in March and April, we saw quite a lot of damages to cargoes because they were left, and quite a few of the cargoes still haven't reached their destinations. Now, this is especially important and critical for cargoes which are perishable in nature. And there we have seen claims coming in where cargo has been left or could not reach destination time and have got damaged in the process. The other impact of supply chain disruptions on the shipping industry is the supplies which go on ships itself. So, for example, spare parts, maintenance equipment, sort of the consumables, for example, the lube oils that are required to run the engines. Then, of course, the surveyors and inspectors who go on board and do carry out checks and inspections, which are so vital to keep the standards up. That has also been impacted. Now, these are various aspects which bring in difficult and different types of risks to the marine operations of the vessels. On one hand, ship owners might struggle to get people on board or get people off their vessels. On the other hand, they might struggle to get spares and consumables on board in time. They might have to use alternatives, which again can be a cause of machinery damage. And from our report, we have seen that machinery damage is one of the largest causes of marine accidents. So there is an impact here, which has a knock-on effect and eventually has a potential to disrupt the nice flow of or the downward trend of the shipping losses that we have seen over the past decade.
All right, Captain Rahul, it raises quite a lot of questions around safety standards, and I would like you to speak to the importance of not losing that progress that we made over the years in securing the safety standards in this industry.
Yes, I mean, as you see from our report, we have brought down as an industry, as a collective effort, the total losses, which is, by the way, just one metric by which we can measure the effectiveness and the safety of our industry. They have come down by almost 70% in the last decade or so, which is a great achievement. Now, but that is not the only measure. The other measure we sometimes use is the incident, the total accident incident that happened. In the last year itself, we have seen 5% increase in such incidents, which is contrary to what the total loss data indicates. So while it is commendable of what we have achieved in the last 10 years, so we should not be losing focus and we should not be really complacent looking at this fact. That the total losses have been reducing. We need to be sure that the safety standards are not let up, and these are a lot of issues that we have to deal with at this point of time. And COVID certainly has not helped. It has complicated the situation a lot more. And our biggest worry is the impending downturn in global economy and world trade, which is going to affect the shipping industry itself. IMO, which is the International Maritime Organization, and the coastal states and ship owners associations and others, in fact, all stakeholders should come together to ensure that we can keep the standards high and make sure the impact of COVID-19 and related effects can be softened to an extent. We will have to dig in. We'll have to dig in our heels. We'll have to tighten our belts to ride the storm, which is going to be coming in the next few years. Hopefully, we can ride it out and not let our safety standards slip down. I think I would also like to add maybe another aspect, which is the climate change and the environmental responsibility which shipping industry has to the global community. And there was a lot of good work being done in the last few years on this particular subject. IMO, just in January 2020, this year, the sulfur cap, as we call it, was implemented, which means that we are trying to use cleaner fuels in shipping now. And this was imposed on 1st of January 2020 and is in force. And there's a lot of hard work which has gone in. But more importantly, the longer term targets for climate change, which shipping industry has taken upon itself, specifically the 2050 targets of reducing the emissions by 50%, is a very important and a difficult target for industry to achieve. That would require a lot of effort. Again, it might require new designs. It might require new types of fuel. It might require a lot of research. We certainly don't have answers for that today, but it is something that we as an industry should not forget in the line at the time where COVID-19 has struck and we are facing other problems. This is a theme that needs to be in the back of the mind of ship owners and other stakeholders in the years going forward up to 2030 and 2050 of how to achieve an industry which is a lot more focused and towards climate change, reducing our emissions, and making the world a lot better place for the future.
All right, then. On that note, we'll have to call it a quit for now. And thank you so much for your time on the show. Quite very interesting perspectives on the shipping industry and the impact of COVID-19 on that sector. I've been speaking to Captain Rahul Khanna. He's the global head for marine risk at Allianz Global Corporate Specialties. And that's it on Beyond Markets for today. And thank you so much for being a part of the show. Remember, you can catch the show at 5 p.m. West African time daily and have access to all episodes of Beyond Markets on our website. That's at cnbcafrica.com. From me and the team, enjoy the rest of your day.